Yet another TUG Connects 365 webinar today. I'm Gloria Nelson, your host with TUG. And as you settle in and get ready for the start of today's webinar, let me give a brief introduction for TUG, the usergroup.org, for both our current members and those of you who represent organizations that have not yet joined our online community of Info distribution software users. Now, we've all heard the phrase, knowledge is power, and I can say with confidence that after today's presentation, you'll be waking up tomorrow with a little more of both. Today is but one of our presentations. We have TUG webinars, online forums, and member events to facilitate the timely exchange of ideas and information to help you work smarter and with more confidence. And that is a winning combination. If you're currently a member, it pays to get even more involved. And if you're not, please visit our website to discover why 2,300 heads are better than one to help you be the best at what you do each and every day. Before we get started, I want to first of all say that we have IP permissions to go ahead and capture screenshots, as well as copy and drop into a place that you want to retain content of any meaningful chat contributions that will help you in your job performance. So without any further ado, it is our pleasure to introduce Pete Billson, Director of Corporate IT with Turtle & Hughes, who will be addressing those pressing issues with cybersecurity that keep our data safe. I'm turning things over to you now, so go ahead and take it away, Pete.
Thank you, Gloria. So let's click there. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for attending today. The title for today's talk is Cybersecurity 101, what you can do now for your organization. And what would any presentation be without a disclaimer? The views I'm going to express today are mine and not necessarily of my employer, Turtle & Hughes. So as Gloria said, my name is Pete Billson. I'm Director of Corporate IT for Turtle & Hughes. So a little bit about me. I just finished up my master's in cybersecurity, focusing on zero trust security at Brown University. I'm working on my CISSP certification now. I've been with Turtle & Hughes for 7 years. Like I said, I'm currently Director of Corporate IT. Before that, I ran my own consulting company for 14 years, and we serviced government and law enforcement. And before that, I was a geek before it was cool. So what we're talking about today is cybersecurity. And I want to start by talking about why do we care? So it really comes down to cost. The average cost of a cybersecurity breach is just under $4 million. And we're not talking about $4 million for a big corporation. We're talking about companies our size, small and medium-sized companies. Large breaches like Experian or the Target breach, those are hundreds of millions of dollars. And if this doesn't scare you enough, this should. 60% of small businesses go out of business within 6 months after suffering a breach. They may be able to recover their systems, but they can never recover their operations. So this is why cybersecurity is so important. And while you're suffering a breach and working on recovering it, it's distracting you from your business. So you lose opportunity costs while you're going through that process. Your IT team, your management team is focused on recovery instead of moving your business forward. In the meantime, your competitors are out there in the marketplace moving their business forward. And then, of course, there's reputational costs. You know, nobody wants to be that person on the front page of the newspaper with their company being advertised in a bad light. So obviously, we all want to avoid cyber incidents. So let me just start with some basics. There's basically 3 types of major cyber breaches at the moment. The first is ransomware, and you've all heard this in the news. Government agencies, hospitals that get attacked and locked out of their systems. Ransomware works by they encrypt your system, and then they demand a ransom payment to recover them. In the old days, you used to be able to say, well, I have a backup. I'm not going to pay the ransom. I'm going to just restore all my systems. That doesn't work anymore. What they do now is they take your data, and if you don't pay the ransom, not only do they not unencrypt it, they share it. They either put it out on the dark web, or they publish it to embarrass you, like we saw in the Sony hack. Then there's also phishing and spear phishing. And we've all seen these in our inbox every day. These are the emails that say, hey, your password needs to be reset. And they send you to a fake form and you have to reset your email password. Spear phishing is the same concept, but it's very targeted. They'll tend to target executives. And what they'll do is it'll be, for example, from the CFO to an AP clerk saying, hey, I need you to cut this check or do this wire transfer right now. And then, of course, there's known exploits. These are weaknesses in software and systems that we all see. You get those Windows updates every month, you know, hey. The bad guys go around and they try to exploit weaknesses in our system. There's automated tools out there so anyone can do it. And the tools are free. So they just scan the internet looking for systems that they can break into. So basically it boils down to it's going to happen. The question is how disruptive is the breach going to be for your organization? So what we focus on is not preventing every possible breach. We focus on limiting the blast radius. Proper design of your systems, proper education, proper segmentation allows that when that breach happens, it won't take down your entire system. It may only affect one system or one machine. And this is what we talk about, that preparation is key. The difference between disruption and disaster is preparation. So like I said, you know, if you don't limit that blast radius, one click on the wrong email by one of your employees could bring down your entire organization. Proper preparation will just turn that into a slight disruption or inconvenience instead of a disaster. So I want to take a poll, just curious. How many people in the audience today have suffered a cyber breach? So Gloria, could you put that poll up? So has your organization suffered a breach? And, you know, I'm asking yes, no, or I don't know. And before you answer, make sure you understand, you know, a breach doesn't mean your entire organization was down for the count. A breach means that somebody who shouldn't be in your organization got in. That could be a virus on a workstation, that could be ransomware on a workstation or a server, or it could be something as bad as an entire, you know, breach. So like I say, it's either yes or no, or I don't know. So interestingly, we have 30%. I was actually expecting it to be slightly more than that, that would have said that they had suffered a breach. 52% say no, and the rest say, I don't know. So the interesting thing about this is we can see that, you know, the people that suffered a breach, this isn't particularly horrible. Like, it happens, and we read about it in the news every single day. So we're going to get on to what you can do about it, what you can do to mitigate your risks. So the human factor is the #1 thing that's the weak link in the chain. And you know, as a cybersecurity professional, I hear things every day that just make my head want to explode. One of the things we often hear is, well, nobody wants to attack our system. We're just a little company. Who cares about us? And the answer is, they're not attacking your system. Like I said earlier, they're just scanning the internet looking for vulnerable systems. They send out 1 million emails and see if anybody fills out the form. You know, if you work for the Pentagon or you work for the CIA, sure, there's people that are gunning for your system. But for the rest of us, it's just drive-by attacks. And they don't care who they break into and who they extort. They'll pick anybody. We don't store any secret data. This one I hear all the time. I'm a distributor. What do we have? Who wants to steal my information? Well, I'm pretty sure most of you have employees. And if you have employees, you're storing PII, personally identifiable information. And that is gold to hackers. So, you know, it is important. There's government agencies. You know, if you're doing business in Europe, if you're doing business in California, there's strict regulations about the exposure of this type of information. Many other states have laws also, and it varies by jurisdiction. But I don't care who you are, you do have secret data that people care about. You hear, we run antivirus, I have a firewall, we're safe. Well, these are foundational elements, and you absolutely need to be running these. But this is just a bare minimum protection on today's internet. All it takes, like I said, is that one email with a fake form to somebody to fill out and send their credentials to the bad guy. No antivirus and no firewall is going to stop that. So, antivirus firewall, very important, but certainly not going to keep you 100% safe. The other thing we hear, we have good backups. There's nothing to worry about. It's discussed before with ransomware. Backups do you no good to not pay the ransom. Plus, nobody likes to, have to depend on their backups. You test them, you hope they're good, but you never feel comfortable when you're restoring from backup. Hear this all the time. Cybersecurity is an IT problem. Let them worry about it. This is the worst of them all. It couldn't be further from the truth. Cybersecurity is everybody's problem. Everybody in the organization has to participate in keeping your organization safe. It has to be in the front of their mind all the time. Like I say, cybersecurity is everybody's job. Good cybersecurity hygiene, it's a company-wide mindset. It is not just the IT department, it's not just the executives, it's not just the management's problem. It is everybody's, and you have to keep this message constantly flowing to your users. Executives, you have to provide good leadership. You have to let everyone in the organization know that cybersecurity is important to you and you care about it. You have to set good examples. Don't ask for special permissions or you want to run as an admin on your machine because you can order the IT department to give you those permissions. You need to set that good example. And it's not that we don't trust the executives to do the right thing. There could be a known flaw in their operating system. And if they're running as an admin and a bad guy gets in, they own the network. So it's really important for those executives to show a good example. And that flows down to managers. The managers need to not encourage bad habits. They not only need to set a good example, they need to make sure they're doing the proper things. So you don't want an AP manager emailing an AP clerk with ACH changes for a vendor. That's just bad practice. Any bad guy could impersonate that AP manager and then send the same email to a clerk and have the funds transferred to their account. You don't want to set up procedures and processes that are vulnerable. You don't want to embed links in the emails you send. Hey, we got to fill out this new insurance HR form. Here's the link to it. And include your name, address, date of birth, and social security number. Again, anybody can spoof that. You should have an internal website. That internal website should have the information, and your email should say, go to the internal website to find out more. It should not have a link to your internal website. Don't reinforce bad habits and train people to click on links in emails. And employees, they have to feel empowered and comfortable. So they have to feel comfortable asking for verification. That AP clerk should absolutely, if she gets that email, she should feel comfortable going to her supervisor and saying, did this really come from you? Is this really what you want me to do? And that manager should not be annoyed that they asked, or of course it came from me. They should thank them for taking the effort to verify it. They should feel comfortable reporting any suspicious activity. Please open a help desk and tell me about this email. That's not spam or not a phishing attack. I'd rather get 100 of those in one good one than miss the good one. They should feel comfortable offering suggestions. The employees are the people in the trenches. They see the problems. They see what's going on. They should feel comfortable talking to anybody in the organization about, hey, I'm noticing this cybersecurity problem. So the meat of why you all came here. What do? You need to stay informed. You don't need to be a cybersecurity expert, but you should pay attention to the news. There's newsletters out there. Smart Briefs sends out some great ones. Just a 10,000-foot view of what threats are out there, what's going on. You don't want to be caught flat-footed in your organization with an email that's been headlining on CNN. So just keep your ear to the ground. The other part is education. You should be educated. Your employees should be educated about cybersecurity, best practices, what you should do. Engage cybersecurity experts for their help and advice when it makes sense. You're not going to be a cybersecurity expert. You have other important business things to do. So, but when you need that expertise, don't guess. Don't have your friend's uncle's brother-in-law tell you. Engage a cybersecurity expert for good quality advice. You should perform testing, audits, reviews on a regular basis. That's great. Nobody has admin permissions. You've locked your machines down. Everybody's antivirus is up to date. Is it really? Maybe some guy forgot to click that last button, because it was a Friday afternoon when he was configuring a group of machines. You want to make sure that your policies are truly going into effect, and you can be assured that they actually are. This is an important thing. There is no such thing as failing a security review. Do them, pay attention to them. If you're an executive, don't beat up your IT team because they got a 3-inch thick report back of all the security flaws they found. They should be commended for doing the review. The whole point of a security review is so you can find your weaknesses and fix them. So don't be fearful of doing a review because it's going to make you look bad. If you know the problems, you can fix the problems. And don't try to eat the whole elephant. You get that 3-inch thick report, you're not going to fix it all this week. You want to fix the things that have the biggest impact. You want to fix the things you can fix. You want to go for the low-hanging fruit, the biggest bang for your buck. But don't try to eat the whole elephant. You're never going to be 100% secure. So go for the big stuff and work your way down the list over time. And this is my pet one, password policies. Create password policies a human can use. Don't have a password policy that's 1 letter, 1 character, a Greek symbol, and you can't use the last 47 passwords you had. You need to have a password policy that makes sense, that your users can use, and allows them to create secure passwords that they'll remember. And we'll talk a little more about passwords later. So at this point, Gloria, if you could put up a poll about passwords, I'm just curious if the people in the audience have a password policy. Does your organization have a password policy? Does it have it and you hate it? Does it have it and you love it? Well, I've got to see that anybody answers that one. Do you not know your password? Your organization has a password policy? Or no, you don't have a password policy. I would imagine at this point, well, I don't want to say anything to skew the results. And I guess I should have put an option on this poll too. Do you have multiple password policies? Because some organizations do, depending on which software they have. Okay, really, 41% of the people said that they have a password policy and they love it. This must be a cybersecurity crowd because that's an amazingly high percentage. 32% say they have one and they don't love it. And that's more the typical response you get from users. They usually want to set their password to cat and go from there. And then we have, 5% say I'm not sure. And that's bad. Like if you have one and they don't know, that's not a good thing. So, like I said, there's so much to do. Where do I start? The key to remember is different organizations have different resources. Only Google can afford Google level security. Turtle and Hughes can't afford Google level security. If we tried to invest like that, we'd have no money to run the rest of the business, and we still wouldn't have Google level security. So you have to look at your organization, look at the size of your organization, and right size your cybersecurity budget for your organization. It's a very basic risk versus reward equation. There's many things you can do right now that have no cost. Might take you some time, no cost. Password policy we talked about, and I'm going to talk about a little more in a minute. There's a perfect example. You can gain huge benefits in cybersecurity from the correct password policy, and it doesn't cost you anything. So where I would suggest starting, if you're kind of lost going, oh my God, I just so much to do, I don't even know where to start. There's lots of frameworks out there. There's think tanks, there's nonprofit organizations, there's government organizations, and they create frameworks to help guide people through this journey so everybody doesn't have to reinvent the wheel on their own. The one that I suggest is the CIS controls framework. And the URLs on the slide show, please take a screenshot. It's free. They're a nonprofit organization. And I think they ask for your email address or something like that, but they don't spam you. This one is great. It's very simple and it's very easy to follow. So here's how it works. They have different implementation groups, implementation group 1, 2, and 3. And it's basically, are you a small company, a medium to mid-sized company, or a large enterprise corporate company? And it's very simple to figure out which one you are and which implementation group you're in. Once you figure out the implementation group you're in, they have recommendations for that group based upon what it's likely you can afford to do. Hey, if you're a group 1 and your budget allows and you can afford the stuff for an implementation group 3, by all means, go for it, swing through the fences. But it really helps you understand and guide your budget to hit the most, like I said, the biggest bang for the buck. So here's an example of their controls. They build step by step. The first control is asset, what's on your network. You take an inventory of all your assets, what devices are on your network, and you do that. You take a inventory of your software, that's step 2. You do vulnerability management, that's step 3, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you can see as we build down through step 20, you're doing penetration tests. That's if you're a group 3. Turtle and Hughes is probably not going to have a blue team and a red team doing penetration tests. We're just not big enough. But a lot of the beginning and medium steps cost time, but very little money. There is software available to help you, like discover the assets on your network, but it's not necessary. If you're small enough, you can go around and just look to see what you have. And even if you do get software like that, it's relatively inexpensive. And the important thing of any of these steps, they're not one and done. It's very important that you have processes in place to revisit it. Like assets and things like that, you got to make sure that you're keeping that up to date. As things leave the network, as things join the network, you have to have a policy in place to make sure you're reviewing them over time. The most effective things you can do are boring. It's like electricity. Nobody thinks about electricity or like the people in Texas right now until something goes wrong. Nobody thought about all the generators and wires and poles and everything because electricity just works. Cybersecurity is the same way. Nobody thinks about it until you have a breach. You're not going to go to your board and brag about any of these items. They're common everyday things. Operating system, antivirus, software updates, automate, 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 and they should be done at least monthly for operating systems, daily for antivirus. Your user shouldn't have to be involved to do them. It should be automatic. These are applied without any input, and they shouldn't be able to cancel them. How many of you have that little Java reminder popping up in the corner next to your clock and you just keep dismissing it? You have a known piece of software with known security vulnerabilities, and you're surfing the web with it. Make sure the updates get done. Admin access. Nobody, including your IT staff, should be doing day-to-day stuff as admin. You should be using a standard user account and only an admin account when you're doing admin steps. Passwords, and I'm going to launch for the next 40 minutes on passwords. I could do a whole presentation on this. The key to passwords is make them long. An 8-character password with special characters and Greek symbols and everything is easy for a hacker to guess. They're not trying to guess your password. They're just brute forcing, trying combinations. A 22-character password is really easy or really hard to guess. And you're going, 22-character password, who's going to remember that? Well, the phrase, this shows TUG is awesome. It's 22 characters. How hard is that to remember? It's going to be, it has a capital T at the beginning of the sentence. TUG is capped. There's an exclamation point at the end. It's a complex password, very long, but it's easy to remember. So forget all the rules about, you need all these special symbols, make them long. And the other thing to say is don't make people change their password constantly. We know what people do. My mom 1, my mom 2, my mom 3. That's no more secure. 2, 3 years ago, NIST, the National Institute of Science and Technology, came out with a recommendation not to have people change their passwords unless there's a reason. You had a breach, they know they lost their password, because they found people chose simple passwords because they couldn't remember them. It's better to let somebody keep their password and make it long. And the best thing you can do, multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication, you're all probably using Active Directory. It's cheap and easy to plug in. If you're using Office 365, you're already paying for it. Bad guy gets your password, there's nothing he can do if he doesn't have the corresponding phone to get that second code. Enable multi-factor authentication if you haven't done it yet. And you can see the other ones, user training, turn off old legacy systems, don't leave security holes running if you don't need them. Review system access, people don't need access to things if they don't use it. And document what you've done so that it's repeatable and you can do it and you can repeat it. And you're done. You follow these steps, you never have to worry about it again. Of course, I'm kidding. Like it says, rinse, repeat. It's a constant process, keep on top of, watch new vulnerabilities, make sure you're updated, and just keep going. So that's what I have to offer to you today, and I'll open it up to any questions that might be out there.
We have a couple of great ones that are bubbling up, and I'm sure that there's going to be more coming down the line, Pete. EJ Durgan says, do you have recommendations for cybersecurity companies that can be used for audits?
So I'm not comfortable saying it in a webinar like that because it's going to sound like this, because it's going to sound like a pitch for them. But at the end, I'll give you my email address, reach out to me, and I will certainly give you some names.
Thank you. We also have another question. This one's anonymous. I always heard that, and that's fine, by the way. You can ping me privately to panelists in the chat window if you don't want to go public with your question. So the first private question is, I always heard that passwords should be changed regularly. Why are you saying not to?
So again, they had done research, and a couple different researchers had done this, but NIST actually came out with formal recommendations. And again, I forget if it was 2 or 3 years ago. So this is old, this isn't new. That people, when they're forced to change their password every 30, 60, 90 days, because they can't remember them, they choose weak passwords, easily guessed passwords. So it's a trade-off. Ideally, you could have somebody change their password once a day, but that's not practical. So when they did the study, they found that a long password that they just keep is way more secure, way less often is it breached than a password that they change every 30, 60, 90 days. There was very little benefit to doing it, and all you're doing is annoying your users.
Understood. We have another anonymous question. Says, you recommended using the CIS framework to help organize my cybersecurity policy. Is it expensive? Good question.
So the answer is no, it's free. So CIS is a nonprofit organization, and they have a whole bunch of different frameworks. The one that I recommended is a real good step to get going. It's really easy to understand and just walk your way through it. The great thing about the framework I recommended is that it ties to their other frameworks. So for example, if you're PCI compliant, which all of us that take credit cards need to be, they have a framework that for PCI that ties to the CIS framework. So the idea is that you can look at your PCI and check off boxes in the CIS framework or the other way around. So you're not doing double work and going, am I PCI compliant or what should I do? It's real easy, kind of check the box, to walk your way down the cybersecurity road.
Exactly. Tim Monroe asks, what are your recommendations for dealing with warnings about self-signed certs, untrusted certs, and expired certs? Good question, Tim.
So this is a very common thing companies do. He doesn't really say, but what a lot of companies do is rather than going out and spending the money for an actual security certificate, they'll launch applications with a self-signed certificate. And you'll get that warning that says, it's untrusted. We don't know who you are. Spend the money on the real certificate. You do not want to train your users to just say okay on that one. It's fine, because they're going to also accept the one they shouldn't accept. I think some of the security certificate organizations now are like $50 or something like that. It's such a small amount of money. Get the real security certificate. If your question was, hey, I went to this site and I got this warning, run away, bail out. Because one of two things, either it's a rogue site and they're not who they say they are, or they're so uninterested in security, they're not spending that little bit of money for a real security certificate. So you gotta wonder what the back end of their application looks like. You don't want to be entering your information on that site.
Sounds like a great deal of wisdom. This is the last one I have right now that's populated either privately in chat or in the Q&A bubble. We will stay and take more. I noticed that a number of people are starting to log off. There seems to be about a 30-minute cap where people carve out time for webinar content. So let me ask you this one last question right now. We will stay in case something else bubbles up. If I can only focus on one thing right now, what should it be?
So that kind of is a organization by organization question, but what I would suggest doing is that chart that I had on the slide, the 101 basics for cybersecurity. If you're not already doing them, do them. If you are already doing them, my recommendation would be what I also recommended, the CIS framework. Go through that framework and start stepping through it one by one by one. Now, obviously, if in your organization, if you have a piece of software, like I don't know if anybody knows about the SolarWinds breach that just happened, where you have a piece of software that has a huge security vulnerability, obviously that should be your number one priority. But as far as general generic advice, I would recommend, those 101 basics, and after those, the CIS framework.
Great. That's good to know. Did have another question populate. EJ comes back for another one and says, for behind the firewall websites that aren't secure, is that a major exposure?
So if you're talking about running, a behind the firewall HTTP site instead of an HTTPS site, it's not, and it's completely behind the firewalls, doesn't ever touch the public internet. It's not a cybersecurity issue per se, but the problem goes back to user training. What you want to be training your users is every website should have an HTTPS. It's very hard for a low-level person who's maybe not so techy to get the difference between, oh, this is behind the firewall and this is in front of the firewall. So it's not really a cybersecurity issue other than you don't want to be reinforcing bad habits for your users. So my answer again, go spend the money on that really cheap certificate. It's worth it.
Good advice. My question to you, Pete, is if someone needs to reach out to you, whether it's for consulting or want to have a question answered, I was going to ask, what's the best way to get in touch with you? And here you are, one step ahead of me always.
I knew the question that was coming. So I invite anybody, it's pete@turtle.com, or you can reach me at my, Brown EDU address, which is peter_bilson@brown.edu. I welcome all questions, just like I'm out here doing this presentation to help fellow TUG members. Cybersecurity, we're all in the same boat. So the stronger cybersecurity we can all get, the safer I am. So please, if you have questions, and EJ, please email me with your question, and I'll give you some recommendations. Please email me if you have questions. I'm happy to reach out. My consulting business has been closed for 7 years, so you won't get a bill. But thank you, everybody, for your time.
We have one more question from Tim. I promise you, Tim and EJ have not been shills in our digital audience. I just want to reassure you of that. These are legitimate questions that are coming in, aside from the ones that were anonymous. Tim says our cart issues started when we began decrypting and scanning traffic. We do use self-signed certs on our PCs and are now getting these cart warning messages from our firewall. So is it a good policy to continue using and learning about our new decryption issues?
So again, self-signed certificates are a bad idea. So I know a lot of people use them and they've been using them for a long time, but they're just a bad idea. The browsers are getting more and more finicky. I'm sure you've all noticed that if you get it gets harder and harder to accept the certificates. What you can do in that case, if you want to issue your own certificates, you can pay for one certificate and sign your generated certificates with that real certificate. And then they will be verified as valid. So I'd recommend that you find the root cause of the problem, not just be like, just say yes.
Great. You have a little fan base here. Della Kofelt says, thank you, Pete. What a wonderful, informative webinar. And I have to agree with that. And in light of the fact that we're losing a little bit of our online audience, what I would like to do is to, number one, say, Pete, thank you very, very much for being with us today. It has indeed been our pleasure to host you here at TUG. And also we want to say, whoops, getting a little happy here on sliding things, trying to close different windows. I've got about 5 of them open on my screen. And also want to thank everyone who joined us digitally online today for today's session. Mark your calendars and watch your inbox along with the forum boards for next Tuesday's invitation as Central Data shares an introduction to Burst Analytics with Burst in a Box for all our ERP users. TUG members, just a quick reminder, if you still have additional questions, post them to the TUG members only forum on our all members forum board for this topic. You usually get quick responses. I know that Pete's going to be there monitoring that so you can continue this ongoing dialogue. And for those of you who aren't yet TUG members, I always say, why not? Those boards are 24 karat gold. So if you haven't joined us, please pop over to www.theusergroup.org and join today. And as they say in Hollywood, that's a wrap.